The history of racing in Long Beach. The run through the streets began 15 years ago with the Formula 5000. In 1976, it became Grand Prix West, one of the 2 Formula One races in the U.S. Throughout the years, as the city grew, the circuit changed. The cars no longer roared past abandoned old buildings, but glittering new hotels. Mario Andretti led the Indy cars to Long Beach and became the dominant driver, winning 3 times. His son Michael scored his first win here. But Al Unser is the defending champion and will start today on the pole, leading the cars in the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. Last week, Rick Mears won at Phoenix and took the points lead in the season-long fight for the kart championship. Today, it's round 2 as the versatile Indy cars move from desert oval to city streets, requiring different technology and driver skills. But the goal remains the same, pass first under the checkered flag. And the giant crowd is ready. The streets are cleared. It's time to go racing. Let's go down to the surface of Shoreline Drive. Here is Jack R02.
And Paul, I'm with Mr. Al Wagner, who's the Vice President of Sales for Toyota Motor Sales USA, and he's going to give the traditional command. Mr. Wagner?
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Engines are started, and we're ready for the run through the streets. Hello, I'm Paul Page, and a week ago at Phoenix, it was a story of Penske dominance. Rick Mears was the pole sitter. His teammate, Danny Sullivan, was alongside. Sullivan led the early laps, and Rick Mears won the race. But now, we're in a different city. It's a different style track, and Sam Posey, a very different story.
Well, the story has shifted from the superiority of a single team, Penske, to the rivalry between the 2 best young drivers in the business, Michael Andretti and Al Unser Jr. Both are just 26 years old, and the battle between them is going to give this sport its shape and character for the next 10 years.
And at Phoenix, we expected mechanical difficulties on the cars, Bobby Unser, but they didn't come. This week, though, they just may.
Well, this is Long Beach, and it's very hard on transmissions here, Paul. It's just always been that way. They shift about 25 times a lap. They go from asphalt to cement, back to the asphalt, cause the tires to slip a little bit. Makes it very hard on the transmissions. And the big story, though, later on in the race, is always going to be fuel at Long Beach. The guy that has the most can run the hardest to the left.
So the cars are out on the course now. Look at that magnificent crowd here today, and let's take a look at the 11 turns that make up the Long Beach circuit. The first turn is a right angle over to the right. Jump down on the brakes at the last second, Bobby.
Certainly is. Late braking is the big answer there. Right into turn 2, round to turn 3 coming up. Very sharp turn.
And a slower section of the course. You pass under a parking garage and then on to Seaside Way. Critical portion.
It certainly is. A lot of shifting coming out of there and a pretty good little straightaway in the back there. Get up some speed in the back, Paul.
And it does provide an opportunity to pass. As they go down Seaside, again, it's a right-hand, right-angle turn.
And then right back to a left-hand turn where everybody kind of washes right in to a hairpin. Now, this hairpin that they go into right at last, coming around right there, is where they really have to get through good, because that's going to determine the front straightaway speed and passing.
And, of course, the hairpin critical, because the faster you come off of it, that nice long shoreline drive is ahead of you. If you can carry your speed through there, you can be very quick around this circuit. That's the course here at Long Beach. Let's take a look at the starting grid for the race. Al Unser Jr. is on the pole. It took him 94 races to win his first pole, but he's up front today. Michael Andretti is alongside. His first career win came here in 1986. Teo Fabi is on the inside of the second row, perhaps with his best chance to notch his first win in the IndyCar since 1983. Danny Sullivan to the outside, looking for his 7th win on a road course. The third row, the inside, Mario Andretti, who leads all the IndyCar drivers with 21 road course victories. Emerson Fittipaldi is alongside. He has competed at Long Beach 10 different times, 5 in the IndyCars, 5 in the Formula One cars. Rick Mears is the inside of the 4th row. He has 6 road course wins, but he's only been able to finish 8th here at Long Beach. Scott Pruitt is on the outside. He made his IndyCar debut here a year ago, and he is ready to challenge today. Bobby Rahal is on the inside of the 5th row. 11 of his 18 victories have come on road courses. And Kevin Cogan is on the outside. Kevin finished 3rd here 1 year ago. We take a look at the rest of the starting field here. There are 28 cars making the start 24 qualified, 4 added by the promoter's option. And some drivers starting for the first time at Long Beach. James Weaver, Taro Pomroth, Steve Saline, and Guido Dacco all starting for the first time on this circuit. It should be a terrific run. The beautiful Queen Mary, Ship of Dreams in the background in one of the prettiest cities in the country for the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. The cars out on the course now, weaving their way about, making final preparations. The crews have all cleared the main stretch. The course clearances being given on the emergency circuits, and we are ready to go racing here at Long Beach. Out in front of the field, the pace car is the Toyota Celica all-track turbo. We're on board with Al Unser Jr. You're riding in the pole position, looking over his right shoulder.
Remember, Paul, earlier today, these other cars have been run. The ARS cars, there's a lot of rubber on the track. So you see the driver scrubbing things, trying to get the tires warmed up.
Onboard cameras in other cars. You've seen that on board with Al Unser Jr. Michael Andretti. He will start on the outside of the front row. That's little Al just ahead. Again, the view is over Michael's right-hand shoulder.
The critical nature of the start cannot be overemphasized. It's so hard to pass on this track that braking late for that first turn after getting a good start is the easiest way to seize the lead.
Now let's go down to the pits. We have a report from Brian Hammonds.
Paul, one of the cars to watch today is the green and white Porsche driven by Teo Fabi. Fabi qualified third fastest for this race, their best effort since joining IndyCars. Now this chassis is only 4 weeks old. They've been working very hard on it. They seem to have hit their stride, and they're hoping for a very good effort here today at Long Beach. Now let's go down pit road to my colleague, Jack Arute.
And Paul, disappointment is struck for the True Sports team. Scott Pruitt had qualified so well, starting in 8th position, has ducked onto pit road, and they seem to have a problem with the ECU unit. That's the brain here for management of the fuel system. They checked it out, they changed a couple of wires, and they sent him down pit road, but the word we received now is he's stalled once again. A tough break for this rookie contender. Back to you.
Well, Scott Pruitt, as you see them pull that car back, was in the pits with his stop for over 2.5 minutes, and now they continue with their trouble.
This would really be devastating to Pruitt's hopes for the season, because it's on this track, a road race with which he's familiar, that he hoped to make his name with this new team.
Pruitt originally scheduled to start in the 4th row. Obviously, that won't happen. The cars are on their pace lap. They wind their way about, pass under the parking garage. Now looking at a left-hander just ahead of them. At this moment, they're single file as they come out from under the parking garage and on to Seaside. Then they should begin to form up and begin looking, thinking, concentrating for a start.
The turns are so sharp here, Paul. The cars can't go around on their pace lap side by side. So in other words, you can't get 2 cars through most of the turns at the same time. So they're all singling out. That's what they're doing. Now they're scrubbing their tires in, trying to see if there's a lot of adhesion because of the other rubber on the track.
Let's take a look at what we expect today. 95 laps. You know the course distance, 11 turns, and the defending champion is Al Unser Jr. Overcast at the moment. The temperature very comfortable, 75 degrees. We do expect the sun to come out during the afternoon. They come off of that final turn, the hairpin. Al Unser Jr. paces the field slowly, and the starter gives the green flag as Al Unser Jr. jumps into the lead, and they're running on the streets of Long Beach. The rest of the field strings their way past. Michael Andretti starts a challenge already as here comes the first row side by side into the first turn. Sullivan drops in 3rd, then Mario, then Teo Fabi.
Well, you can see that late braking between Michael and Al Jr., Paul. They just, one of them didn't know what the other was going to do and who was going to give in first.
But the interesting thing is they both respect each other very much, Bobby, and they were determined not to have a collision in that first turn. You could see how careful they were with each other.
It happened to Michael last year, Sam, and it's a very easy thing to happen here because cement on both sides of the racetrack. There is no grass to get off on. They have to keep it within those cement walls.
Long Beach is, in fact, a concrete canyon all the way. If you spin off on a circuit like this, generally your race is over unless you can keep that engine going and keep it away from the wall, and that's not likely.
Well, and often you involve someone else in your crash, and that's the reason, even if you're driving along apparently by yourself on the track, you're always keeping a weather eye ahead of you for someone that may be blocking the line.
Al Unser Jr. takes the green flag at the conclusion of lap 1, and leads coming down. Michael is just behind. Then Danny Sullivan, then Mario Andretti, as the first 4 cars have begun to separate themselves. And here comes Mario trying down the inside, picks up Danny Sullivan, and moves into 3rd place.
Well, this is this underlines the story of woe of the Penske cars so far here at Long Beach. Obviously, Sullivan could not stay with Mario under braking there. If that becomes the story of the day, Sullivan is going to be passed by other people too.
And here is a terrible disappointment. Teo Fabi is into the pits. He had done so well, qualified in 3rd position. The Quaker State team hoping for a good product here today, and now Peter Parrott and the crew pushing the car down into the pits.
Now again, Paul, these cars are new. If people are wondering why do they have problems so early on in the race, it's their new cars. This is only 2nd race of the year for them. They went from an oval track at Phoenix right here to Long Beach. They're turning to the right instead of the left all the time. And these are some of the reasons they have problems early on.
On board the 2nd place car, Michael Andretti.
You'll notice he comes out of the hairpin very close behind Al Unser Jr. But in terms of time, it's still about half a second. And that half second, as they accelerate down the straight, grows to a much greater distance. The nature of watching a race like this.
Here comes Mario trying inside his son Michael. Michael very carefully, but still comes across his front, keeps Mario back.
Boy, everyone is determined to avoid a collision, at least early in the game, in that first hairpin, which has undone so many hopes throughout the years. But I was just going to say, you have to watch very carefully this race. The cars will appear to be closing up on others at the hairpin and then seeming to have no horsepower on the straightaway. But it's not really that way. It's just that the time stays the same. The distance changes a lot.
So in the first laps here at Long Beach, the pole sitter Al Unser Jr. picks up the lead from the green flag, being followed by Michael Andretti. And now Michael begins to be challenged by his father. Danny Sullivan runs back in 4th place. The action continuing. We'll be back with more after this. Back at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, Mario and Michael Andretti have swapped positions. Al Unser Jr. continues to lead. Then Danny Sullivan and Bobby Rahal started 9th. There he is, as Rahal in that blue and yellow number 18 car has now moved up to 5th place and is charging his way up through the field. At the moment, he's running alone, but very shortly he should be in contact with the 4th place driver, Danny Sullivan. The problem with the Porsche, let's go down to the pits, Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, as you alluded to, the Porsche's been on pit road for several laps now, and they're continuing to work on the car. And this is Derek Walker, who is the team manager for this operation, and he's been checking with his crew. What seems to be the problem, Derek?
Well, the car started misfiring right at the start of the race. We haven't really determined what the problem is right now, but it's a shame because we were really looking forward to the race.
Well, as you look over the car as well, there's a lot of water that's been seeping out of the radiator, and there seems to be a problem as Derek Daly now comes onto pit road. So that's a difficult day for the Rayner team as well. Back to you.
Derek Daly in and out with a very quick pit stop. Already the leader, Al Unser Jr., having engaged some back marker traffic. Cars that had been starting in the back of the field and then pulled out got involved with the leader. So we have a little separation. Al Unser Jr., Bobby, has been able to put some distance between himself and the 2nd place car, Mario Andretti.
He certainly has, Paul, and incidentally, they were a little bit worried about that car in the very beginning. Yesterday, in the last practice session, the car wouldn't start. And what had happened is one of the hoses that goes on the fuel tank where the fuel comes from to go to the engine had a blockage in it. And it was just lucky for him that they were able to find it yesterday, but not only that, apparently they fixed it.
Well, Mario Andretti and then his son Michael both make their way past the slower car of Scott Brayton and now can resume their fight for the lead, trying to chase down Al Unser Jr., the defending champion here.
It's good to see Mario leading Michael just at this stage, if only because you wonder as the season goes on what the relationship between these two men, father and son, is going to be like. What if Michael is actually able to establish superiority over Mario during the season? I wonder if Mario has really crossed that bridge himself. The idea that the focus of the team might shift to Michael during the season. I wonder if Michael is a better driver right at this point than Mario. I doubt it, and what we're looking at right now suggests it isn't the case, but I think it's going to be an emotionally fraught season for both of them.
We speculated some time ago that them being a team was something that they would probably, as a family, wish to avoid. They did not. You're riding with Michael Andretti now. as he is trying to chase down the leader, Al Unser Jr.?
Well, I think the reason they wanted to avoid being together on a team was largely because they don't like two-car teams, either of them. They don't like to share their secrets. Well, they were the only person, of course, that they could share their secret with was their father, their son. And so the team was just barely possible that way, but it'll be interesting to see if it lasts.
So it is Al Unser Jr. with a 3.5-second lead over the second-place car of Mario Andretti. Let's go to the pits and update now. Here's Brian Hammonds.
Paul Scott Pruitt is still in the pits. A few laps ago, they got the car fired. He started to pull out of the pits. It backfired and died. They pushed him back, and now the crew is pouring over the car trying to locate the problem. It is an electrical problem. Now, as far as Derek Daly's concerned, you saw him come in for a quick pit stop. They're getting extremely high temperature readings. They think it's a false read, though. They send him back out, back upstairs.
Another driver who's starting off with a hot season is Dominic Dobson. Now, he qualified poorly with an 18th position after a rather impressive third qualification position at Phoenix. He is already carving his way up through the field and running 11th. In other words, he passed 7 cars in 7 laps. You see the interval now between the first-place car of Al Unser Jr. Here comes Mario, here comes Michael, and then Danny Sullivan.
It's interesting to watch these cars going into the first turn, which is usually late braking, and how some of them will split the asphalt and the cement. In other words, one tire on the asphalt, one tire on the cement. You can watch right there as the cars go from asphalt to cement, Paul. And what happens is you brake on different types of surfaces on the different side of the car. Very often the cars don't brake very straight. As we go on, you watch little Al and Michael and Mario and see the differences in the way they brake going into the first turn.
Let's go down to the pits for just a moment. Jack Arute has an update on Kevin Kogan.
And Paul, we're beginning to see something that's very disconcerting to me, and it's a whole bunch of electronics problems. Kevin Kogan has brought his car on the pit road. Remember, he ran so well here not only last year but also in these practice sessions. They report an electronics malfunction as well. So the computerized age may have come to IndyCar racing, but it's got a lot of people baffled and on pit road for a long time. Back to you.
So Kevin Kogan battling his problems as well, and a good number of his fans from Southern California here in the stands here today. Al Unser Jr. continues to lead.
As you watch he come down into that first turn, Paul, he had his left tire on asphalt, his right tire on cement. There they crossed the cement and the asphalt again. Sometimes the cars wiggle right there. As we follow through, and Al Unser, or Al Jr.'s in-car cam, you can watch even the white lines when they're going parallel with the car have a tendency to make the cars get a little bit jumpy, a little bit squirrely.
The walls on a course like this tend to make some drivers very, very nervous. Little Al doesn't seem to have any hesitation in driving right out to them.
No, it's kind of like he gets his practice like from Pikes Peak. You just get to where, like at Pikes Peak, you can never look down. Well, right here, you have to get to where the walls just are a side view, and they're not an important thing except the racetrack is between them.
Yeah, but that's a great comparison, Bobby, because at Pikes Peak, if you go off the course, you roll 4,000 feet down the hill. And so you know you cannot make a mistake, and that's the way Al Unser Jr. was raised. The idea you could not afford to make a mistake, and that's an ideal mindset for someone running on a street course like this or at Monaco, which we're going to cover incidentally in 3 weeks.
And also, Sam, if you do clip a wall here as we watch through the race, maybe it'll happen to some cars. The cars have no way of getting out of the way. They often block the path of the car coming behind them. So that's another reason the drivers have to be a little extra careful.
Al Unser Jr. out in front and picking up where he left off last year. He led the last 54 laps of this race to win a year ago. We asked little Al, not considering racing, what things make you angry?
I don't know. The thing in everyday life that upsets me most is the continuing stories and so on about people getting killed in automobile accidents because of a drunk driver. That you know, it's something that irks me because everybody knows that they're not there when they're drunk or when they've been drinking, and because of all of the publicity and everything, they know that you shouldn't, that you can't drive when you've been drinking, and they still do, and that's something that upsets me more than anything is how these people keep getting behind a car and driving when they're drunk.
By the way, that's an attitude that not only does Al Unser Jr. have, but I think is shared by most of the drivers and, in fact, crews in IndyCar racing. Al Unser Jr. leads 11 laps of the 95 scheduled distance complete. Shelley Unser is just bringing her way through this race. We'll be back. Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, Al Unser Jr. is the leader. He has led right from the start of this race. Mario and Michael Andretti continue a nice little fight. Then Danny Sullivan, and then this man. There's Sullivan, and there is Bobby Rahal, a two-time IndyCar champion, and he's really moving his way up through the field.
Yes, Paul, but I don't think it's any surprise to Bobby. I was talking to him yesterday after practice concluded. At that point, he was in 9th place, but he pointed out to me that he was only half a second out of second place on the grid. So he knew he could move up if everything went well. And, you know, chatting with Bobby Rahal is a great experience. It's like the informal talks that sports writers used to have with the managers of pro baseball teams standing on the edge of the dugout. He's casual. He's very relaxed. He's a wonderful guy, and you know, he's a guy whose life is in a period of exciting transition. When he left the Budweiser team last year to join the Craco team, got paid roughly $1 million, we understand. He has a couple of automotive dealerships that are opening up. So he is becoming very much a man in business, looking ahead to the future. He has children now, which took a long time and was a hard story for him. And I think, you know, we see him closing on Sullivan now, and I think that Bobby Rahal is very much a man in every way on the move.
Bobby Unser.
Mostly, Sam, he's trying to prove that he's not made a bad mistake by switching over to getting a large amount of money in 1 year for a driver's contract and didn't make a bad move on the car. And he's out the river right now chasing Danny Sullivan very hard.
Now the fight begins for 4th place as they move around Bellavio, and Sullivan is currently 4th place in that white and gold car on Shoreline Drive. Now coming down to the first turn and under braking, Rahal is able to close in. And here Bobby Unser is a comparison of engine power. The Judd engine in Bobby Rahal's car, the Chevrolet in Danny Sullivan's car.
Well, in Rahal's car, they've got the Cosworth. That's the new Cosworth, Paul, and it's a short stroke, and they really think that they're catching the Chevrolet. There's a Cosworth versus a Chevrolet. Now, some of that you see right there is braking, but as they hit the back straightaway here a little bit, there's under the underpass by the hotel. That's where you'll be able to see the real big power difference, and I think they're getting a lot closer with the Cosworth.
Bobby Rahal really beginning to worry Danny Sullivan now as they come on to Seaside, and that's Randy Lewis ahead, who gives them the inside line as they come to the right-hander.
Bobby told me in that same conversation last night that the easiest place to pass by far was at the end of the main straight, and with that in mind, they trim the wings way down flat. They don't really need the downforce in these slow turns because you don't get that much downforce in the slow turn. And so we're seeing them come onto the straight here where Rahal himself thinks he has the best chance to make a move. Perhaps not this lap, but maybe soon.
So the fight continues between 4th and 5th as we watch Randy Lewis accelerate down the Shoreline Drive, and Rahal continues to worry Sullivan. Let's go down to the pits now. An update report coming from Brian Hammonds.
Paul, A.J. Foyt, running in only a second Long Beach Grand Prix, is out of this race after an altercation on the course. A.J., what happened?
Well, actually, the car stumbled a little bit, and I guess Weaver was driving way over his damn head, running the back of him, hit the rear suspension.
James Weaver driving in his first IndyCar race. You think he's over his head?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You think James Weaver's over his head?
Well, I don't know if he's over his head, but hell, I mean, you got a hairpin corner, and when a car stumbles, you know, you ought to have your car under control where in the hell you know where the brake pedal is.
AJ's done today, but next month we'll see him in his 32nd Indianapolis 500. Now let's go to Jack Arute.
And Brian Hammond, Shelley Unser, the wife of Al Unser Jr., your leader, is in one of the cheap seats here. Shelley, what's their reporting on Al? Is everything okay?
Everything seems to be going good.
Maybe cheap seats for Shelley Unser, but she's got a TV monitor, and she's watching the action out on the racetrack. Back to you, gentlemen.
And the action is without question the fact that Al Unser Jr. is out in front, but the fight is still for 4th place as Danny Sullivan continues to try and hold off a charging Bobby Rahal. They move their way around the red and silver car of Derek Daly. Rahal trying to chop his way around Sullivan. Sullivan doing a pretty good job of keeping him back, and again with two different kinds of power. One will have a tendency to do better in some sections of the course, and then the other car will come on in the others. So it's making for a very nice seesaw battle here. Fans are loving it.
It's the kind of precision driving that some drivers have a flair for, others do not really. Rahal has always had a great flair for this kind of thing, and in fact, he is hoping sometime in June, he tells me, to make a carrier landing, which is the sort of thing that I would say puts this maybe a bit in the shade. I mean, talk about something that requires precision.
Danny Sullivan occupies 4th place now. Bobby Rahal would ride it. Would love to have that position. And that story continues with the Porsche car and Teo Fabi. It's been in the pits twice recently, and it doesn't look like it's doing very well. Bobby Rahal continues his charge on Sullivan. Bobby Unser.
He's really working hard trying to pass Sullivan. There's a little gap right now, but of course down the front straightaway, as Stan mentioned a while ago, where they like the slipstream and then out brake. Late braking right there is the place on this track, the easiest place to do the passing. Now later on, they'll do a lot of it in the back straightaway, especially when the track gets slippery. But you see now, Sullivan is trying exceptionally hard to stay ahead because he realizes that if Rahal were to pass him, getting back by Rahal is just not going to be easy.
As we look down on some of the slower turns on the course, slower if you think 80 miles an hour is slow, this is really a section of the course where the drivers set the cars up for the critical sections, those little straightaways where the passing actually takes place. This is Seaside Way. They come on to Seaside. Now there's a right-hander lying just ahead of them. Both move for an advantage and try to get past in the right-hander.
Put yourself in Sullivan's shoes just for a second. Remember that last year, as the championship finale approached toward the end of the season, he was aware that every single point that he scored, whether by leading the most laps of a race, by getting on pole position, whatever it was, by gaining a 4th position instead of a 5th, counted. Sullivan has a championship mindset, and so this is not a casual battle for him. He is fully aware of the implications of a swap in positions and what it could mean, not at the end of today, when the difference between 2nd and 3rd or 3rd and 4th may not seem that much, but in October, when the championship is coming down to the last races.
Of course, we're looking at the championships of the past 3 years represented in those 2 cars. Bobby Rahal, a 2-time champion. We saw him one of the corners, Bobby Unser, back in, come chopping out on Rahal's car. You think it's the corner, or is that the way he's driving?
It's the roughness. You can watch the cars bouncing around quite a bit. Remember, these are the streets of Long Beach, so it's not made to be a racetrack. It's a temporary circuit, therefore it's not very smooth. The cars bounce a little bit. Just watch them right there. Now, this has to do with braking, but also cornering force, Paul.
The fight continues for 4th place at the front of the field. Nothing has changed. Al Unser Jr. leads. 2nd place is Michael Andretti. 3rd is Mario Andretti. We'll keep an eye on this battle. Let's go down to the pits once again.
And Paul, there are a lot of disappointed drivers starting to make their way onto pit road behind the wall. One is Kevin Kogan. Kevin, you're out very, very early. What put you out?
We've had electrical problems, and we didn't get to qualify Saturday, and we put our new motor in for the last session Saturday, and it didn't run right, and we thought we got it fixed last night, but we didn't. It just wouldn't run at all, and then we thought we maybe fixed it in the pits. I went out and lost my clutch, so I really feel bad because we started out good here. We were, pretty quick on Friday.
Well, let's update you on additional electrical problems as the scenario continues down at the Budweiser pit and True Sports entry. Let's go to Brian Hammonds.
Jack, Scott Pruitt has retired without even completing a lap. Steve Horn, the team manager of True Sports, is here. What was it that put you out?
Well, if we knew, we'd probably fix it, but we've got some sort of electrical malfunction, and we've been unable to locate it. I kind of feel sorry for Scott because I think he had a really good chance today, but there'll be other days.
Electrical problems continue to be the story here at Long Beach. Paul?
Well, when we started this race, we did indicate that maybe mechanical problems would begin to loom, and they certainly have, and very early on. Fuel will still be a story here today as well. We'll be back with more from the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach right after this. At the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, Paul Page with Sam Posey, Bobby Unser, Jack Arute, and Brian Hammonds. The leader is Al Unser Jr. He has a full 10 seconds ahead of everyone else. The 19 car by the side of the course. Driver climbs away. No problem there. On board with Al Unser Jr. We've had some mechanical difficulties with several cars in the early going, taking out some fairly critical entrants. Teo Fabi, Scott Pruitt, Kevin Kogan, all reporting out of the race with mechanical difficulty. Bobby Unser, you look over the steering wheel when we come back to the other shot. This is what Al Unser Jr. is experiencing. And now as we look here, look just over the center of his steering wheel. Everything now is liquid crystal display. He's got a lot more data.
Well, what it is, it's all computer. It's this wire technology age we're in, computers. And that thing has a tachometer, oil pressure. Well, you can come in the pits. They can plug into that thing, Paul, and off that little thing, it will tell them anything that they want to know that car's been doing, both engine, handling-wise, fuel consumption. One of the main reasons they have it in there to tell how much fuel they have left.
And what the systems now do that they've not had in the past is some very precise fuel measurement. And for the first time in race cars of this style, they can tell how fast they're going. Many of these systems actually read miles per hour. It's hard to believe, since we haven't passenger cars, the race drivers haven't seen miles per hour in race cars since the inception of IndyCar championship car racing.
Yeah, the key is, though, do you want to know?
You may not. You just may not, especially in this section where Al Unser Jr. comes up to top speed over 180 miles an hour going down shoreline.
You can watch it move right there. Just keep your eye on the center and that liquid crystal thing. That's the tachometer. That's the RPM the car's running, Paul.
You know, it's interesting to see Al Unser Jr. taking up, as you mentioned, Paul, really where he left off last year, and to realize how often in racing history a driver will dominate on a particular track, winning 4 or 5 races in, say, a 6-year period on a particular track. At the early years here, it was Mario Andretti. Over in Europe, for years, it was Jim Clark winning 1 race, Graham Hill winning another race. And for some reason, once a driver, and this is often with different teams, of course, always different cars, but driver develops some kind of a clue for a track that just gives him an edge. And then, of course, after a couple of victories, it gives him a psychological edge over his opponents because they expect him to win.
Taking a look at that battle for 4th place once again, as Danny Sullivan still has a very aggressive Bobby Rahal just behind.
Another thing, different technology that's really becoming common with almost all the teams is shock dynamometers. You can see how rough this course is. Yeah, it isn't rough for a passenger car, but it's rough for race cars. You can see the cars bouncing around a lot. A lot of the teams carry what they call a shock dynamometer in their trucks. That means that they can take the shock absorbers, work them up and down, and again, through computers, tell exactly what they're doing and adjust them accordingly to keep records for every race that way. That's one of the things that's helping little Al. The inventions of all this shock dyno stuff has come from the Gallus team.
Danny Sullivan comes up to the inside of Pancho Carter and moves around him. Bobby Rahal tries the inside as well. Dominic Dobson is lying just ahead of them as the battle for 4th place continues to work its way around the track. The front of the field is fairly static. Al Unser Jr. has a 13-second lead over Michael Andretti. Mario Andretti is 3 seconds back behind Michael, and then there is this battle for 4th place. Let's go down to the pits once again.
And Paul, with a temporary road course, you know, they use the street circuits, and it's the streets that people drive on. Well, here's what happened to Teo Fabi's car. See this stone right here? Well, it was kicked up by the front wheel of the car, and we're using Bernard Jourdain's car to illustrate this. It was kicked up and actually penetrated in through the radiator of the Porsche entry. It split the radiator open. It sent the temperatures, the water temperature that is, sky high, and now Teo Fabi's been forced to park the vehicle. Back to you.
Terrible piece of luck for Teo Fabi and that Porsche contingent, because they looked like they had a great day starting.
Well, Porsche just had Fabi just had a new daughter. He said he wanted to go home to Milan to see her early. He's going to have that chance.
These are the cars out of the race to this point. We've talked with most of these drivers, and most of them have been mechanical situations. So we predicted it. Already it's begun to happen, but that's not going to make for a great race if it continues. Still, I think generally in a race you will have a flurry of mechanicals at the front, which are generally preparations or little minor problems from the running so close together. Then it'll tend to calm down, and in this race, if the script plays, fuel may just be the real question at the end of the race.
We were all looking for the Porsche to see how it was going to do today. Everybody had high expectations of it. New car, a lot of new people, went from the Penske team over there. They really looked for the Porsche deal, but that rock going through the radiator, Paul, is a very, very rare thing anymore, because inside, just where the rock went, there's usually a wire screen, and that should stop the rocks from hurting the radiators.
On board with Michael Andretti right now, 13 seconds out in front somewhere there is Al Unser Jr., but you can see on this circuit 13 seconds is an incredible distance. Only for a second can he get a glimpse of the leader ahead. Next Sunday on ABC Sports, the spotlight will be on the up and coming, the future legends in the world of basketball at the McDonald's All-American High School basketball game. See all the players you'll be hearing about in the future. Next Sunday, live from the Kemper Arena in Kansas City. The Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, 28 laps are complete. The schedule that most of these pit crews are operating off of calls for a pit stop at lap 35. Now, of course, that's the pre-game plan. With this sophisticated gear like we've seen on board these cars, they're getting a little bit different information from real time, and so that 35-lap schedule could change somewhat. You watch the number 6 car, Michael Andretti. He runs in second, trying to chase Al Unser Jr. We'll be back with more from Long Beach in a moment. The battle for fourth place. That gold and white car of Danny Sullivan holds it at the moment. They're trying to work their way past Scotty Brayton, and Ray Hall, with a pretty slick move, comes inside Brayton in the corner. You would have expected he might have waited until he came off the corner, Bobby.
Ray Hall has really been trying to use traffic to his advantage to try to get around Danny Sullivan. In fact, if you watch when they get close to traffic, he really gets to trying about as hard as he can.
It gives you an idea, though. Ray Hall didn't want to lose any contact at all. He really pulled a pretty gutsy move to come inside and stay in touch with Sullivan.
True, but now the pit stops are just between 3 and 5 or 6 laps away. So the percentage of making a pass at this point, I mean, what you gain from it is less than if Ray Hall had been able to get by Sullivan, say, 10 or 15 laps ago when he first got close to him. Now he's got to say to himself, do I want to take that big risk when I know that I can only pull away from him for 3 or 4 laps?
Except, Sam, first in, first out. Everybody's getting pretty good. Everybody's been copying Roger Penske on pit stops now for many years. So they're all getting a lot closer to him, and if Ray Hall could get in first, chances are he'd get out first.
Right now, a lot of two-way radio conversations going on between the pits and their cars in action on the track as they begin to try and sort out, and the technology is incredible. All kinds of laptop computers in use and everything, trying to decide now with the information coming from the driver and what they feel about the race, can we go a lap or 2 more? And that decision at the end of the 95 laps could be absolutely critical.
Plus, to pick up Bobby's theme of why Ray Hall would want to get by, there's just nothing like a pass, is there? You know, it just feels so good, and they might not come out of the pits in a position like this to have a straightaway duel. It might be that Ray Hall just automatically comes out ahead. So for that reason, too, he might override the logic of the situation just out of the emotion of the situation.
The other side of that, anticipating the pit stops, is it is the one time, in this case of this race, perhaps twice, that the pit crew can shine. The driver has no impact on the stop at all, and some of these crews are so good that they can get the driver out faster and actually get a position.
Sure, and suppose you're a member of one of the pit crews waiting right now as the laps tick down to the moment that pit stop. You are about to become a participant in the race, not a support person at all, but an actual participant, and these guys get very nervous.
As you watch Danny Sullivan, Bobby Ray Hall go, you can know that Sullivan is holding Ray Hall up just a little bit. If he were able to get by, he would be able to pull away because the sharp turns are holding him up.
There's the blimp, the Columbia, based over in Carson, California, not far from here. John Creighton from Redondo Beach is the pilot. They're giving us some of the overhead shots that we are seeing today. The battle, 4th and 5th. We take a look down on the course as Ray Hall, Sullivan continue to fight with one another. It's static up in front. Here's a piece of information that might be important at this point. Al Unser Jr. has a 17-second lead over Michael Andretti. The average pit stop should only take about 16 seconds. Now, that doesn't account for slowing down coming into the pits or accelerating coming out. And that's different here because the pit entrance is just a little bit beyond the hairpin. So, Bobby, you're slowing down a little bit earlier than I think you'd like to.
Oh, certainly, that's true. But remember, they'll all have to pit very close within the same time. Now, what will happen, the leader will set the precedent of when most of the people will pit. Maybe they'll try to go a lap longer, but what's happened, little Al will probably come in on lap 35. Ray Hall, Michael, Mario right there will probably try to stay out a little bit longer just in case a yellow flag.
Mario Andretti tries inside Michael. It's a fight for second in the first turn at the end of Shoreline, and Mario Andretti has him for the moment as Danny Sullivan comes into the pits. A very quick move on Sullivan. He was in 4th place, and Brian Hammonds is there.
stop, 4 tires, full load of fuel. Danny had radioed his crew, said the car is handling just fine. The only complaint he has is if he's really down on straightaway speeds. If he's vulnerable anywhere on the track, it's in the straightaway. Sullivan back out of the track.
The stop in just a tick over 15 seconds. Here's Rick Mears. He currently runs in 6th place, the teammate to Danny Sullivan, out on the race course now, and Mears should be coming in shortly. So Sullivan in. If he was looking for a 35-lap schedule, he came in on lap number 34, breaking off that battle with Bobby Rahal.
As we watch Rick Mears, you might say, well, how could he have been so dominant at Phoenix just a week ago? And now here he is back in 7th place just at the moment. The answer is, of course, his major accident at Santa Ana Speedway some years ago left his legs and his feet not quite as operational as he might like them. And on a, as Bobby said in the at the beginning of the race, there were 25 or 26 shifts per lap, each of course involving all of your, both of your feet, and it's just that little tiny bit tougher for Rick Mears.
Emerson Fittipaldi makes a stop. Fittipaldi moved up to 5th when Danny Sullivan made his stop. Fittipaldi was just a bit behind that battle between Sullivan and Rahal. And as the stops begin, the leader, Al Unser Jr., anticipated at any moment he makes the final set of turns. Rick Mears comes into the pits. Now most of the leaders coming in, and Al Unser Jr.'s crew is ready. The equipment laid out. Al Unser Jr. should be heading for the pits. As we watch Mario and Michael, Al Unser Jr. now comes in for his stop, beginning to roll on pit road. There's little Al. And let's go down to Jack Arute.
And Al Unser Jr. takes a tearaway off his visor. They complete the exchange of tires. Owen Snyder holding him up as they put him back up on the jack so that they complete the exchange of the right front. They spray the water, and he is having a little bit of trouble getting back into gear, but he is off and away. A good quick stop, Paul.
Well, 20 seconds, though, Jack Arute, a little bit slower as he pulled away. And Mario Andretti, who was running in 2nd, went past while Al was in the pits, and so Mario Andretti picks up the lead of this race.
Well, Mario will still have to come in and make his pit stop, so it should probably reverse things. But the idea is, again, he could find a yellow flag. Something could happen. Somebody could have a wreck going in or out of the pits. Mario will look for every little edge that's anywhere near possible like that.
So Mario Andretti, car number 5, that white and black machine, picks up the lead. Michael Andretti just behind is running in 2nd place. Radio communications continue back and forth between the Andrettis and their respective crews. Not a common frequency. They're each on their own separate channels, and like the Penske team, this team tends to race within itself. Though being new as a 2-car operation, they're still sorting out some of that thinking, and I think there's a tendency to have a bit of a Formula One influence. That is to think, well, maybe we ought to work the cars together. Here comes Mario, the leader of the race now, as he's in the pits. Jack Arute.
And Mario Andretti takes a cool drink out of a squeeze bottle. They exchange all 4 tires on the car for the Carl Haas team. The fuel is going in. Seems to be a relatively easy pit stop. Although the report we were getting as he goes off and away is that he was pushing just a tad through the corners. But a very quick stop for Mario Andretti.
Well, Mario Andretti in and out of the pits very, very quickly. And look at this fight as Bobby Rahal comes up to challenge Al Unser Jr. This is a fight for 2nd place. Rahal has not yet stopped. Michael Andretti has not stopped either, and he came onto Shoreline picking up the lead from his father. So through the stops, we're seeing some change in position.
You see how much lead Al Unser Jr. had, because here is, as you said, Bobby Rahal has not made his stop yet, and here's Al Unser Jr., who has made his stop, running roughly in the same place.
Sam, what you can really see from that is Bobby Rahal was flat able to outbrake little Al. That's because he is very light or almost out of fuel. Little Al just got 40 gallons of fuel on board. It's really heavy and harder to stop the cars. So that's the reason Rahal's going so much faster right now.
You really hate coming out of the pits as Michael Andretti comes into the pits.
Let's go to Jack Arute.
And Paul, again, they're going to change 4 tires, this time on the Carl Haas entry for Michael Andretti, the son of 49-year-old Mario. A good run by this 2-car operation, and they put it back into gear, and he has a slight problem, a miscue, and it looks as if they're going to check some in. They haven't taken up enough fuel. Now they've done that, and let's go to Brian Hammonds, who's with Bobby Rahal's pit stop.
And it's a very good pit stop. 4 new tires, a full load of fuel. Bobby very happy with the handling of the race car. There will be no adjustment on that. Rahal still waiting, takes a cool drink from the the squeeze bottle. The fuel is out. Bobby now off the jacks. He's pushed away. Bobby Rahal back out into the race.
And Rahal, one of the last to stop, moves back into the action, but Al Unser Jr. now has the lead. So he started from the pole, led most of the laps in the early going, and Al Unser Jr. is now back out in front. We'll be back with more from the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. Back at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, you're looking at the leader, that number 2 Valvoline car. It belongs to Al Unser Jr. He started on the pole, his first pole in his IndyCar career. He started well off into the lead, giving the lead up only when he headed for the pits. It then went to both Michael and Mario Andretti. But when they made their stops, Al Unser Jr. came back to the lead once again. And he is really roaring around this course.
Well, he certainly is, Paul. In fact, you watch sometimes we see the inboard cam, we see how he pushes, how the car gets through the turns. He's really handling good. Again, I think a lot of it is because they've really been able to dial their shock absorbers good to the road.
Al Unser Jr. out in front by about 11 seconds over the second-place machine of Mario Andretti. Michael Andretti is about 6 seconds behind that.
When you come out of the pits, particularly on a road course like this one, with a full load of fuel, it's surprising how sluggish the car feels for the first few laps. You can't brake as deep. It doesn't accelerate nearly as well. And the driver, in a sense, undergoes a little bit of a personality change because that weapon of which he was a part, and the drivers are so much a part of their cars these days that it's like an extension of their senses. That weapon is not quite as precise, not quite as quick acting as it was when they went into the pits.
Drivers are being amazingly careful here today, too. Incidents have been few. We've seen a couple of cars off the side of the course. As we take a look at the race summary, Al Unser Jr., of course, has been absolutely the dominant factor here. Just a reversal of what we saw a week ago at Phoenix, and it certainly sets the stage now for our coverage of the Indianapolis 500. This is the last race on the schedule before the Indianapolis 500. And given the story to this point, we're going to Indianapolis with Penske very strong on the oval, but Al Unser Jr. running away here. And, of course, the Newman-Haas team, Michael and Mario Andretti, certainly still in the contest as well. Here on ABC, we'll be covering as Tom Sneva. That is a Buick-powered 1986 March. Comes into the pits, and he's been able to carry that car quite a distance further, 42 laps without refueling. That could very definitely become a factor if Sneva can stay up in the field. He is currently running 10th, so he's not in contest, Bobby Unser.
Well, he's been
finally get him out.
Yeah, he's been lapped, Paul, and I think one of the things is he's just not going quite as fast as the cars that are leading the race are running up in front, so he'd probably make a little fuel or better fuel mileage than the other guys. But on the other side of that same coin, I have a hunch that Buick has that engine dialed in super good because it's really a lot bigger than these other engines. It's a stock block type.
Mario Andretti, the second place car, chasing Al Unser Jr.
As we talked about the difference in engines, it's interesting as you look down the list here of the top runners at the moment. The first 4 cars are all Lola chassis. So they seem to have a real edge in superiority on this track.
Sam, there's very little that's not here besides Lola except for the Penske's and of course the Porsche March, which we lost early, so it's becoming kind of a spec Lola series right now.
Let's go down to the pits. This report from Jack.
And Paul Page, with hundreds of thousands of dollars devoted to computer technology, the outcome of this race may be predicated by what John Anderson figures out right here. He's computing the gas mileage for the rest of this, for the fuel consumption. John, what's the word? Can you go the distance with the fuel allocated today?
Well, I keep pushing the buttons, and it tells us it's going to be very close, but we're just going to have to preserve our lead, short shift, and keep the boost turned down.
Now, remember one thing that we've noticed, gentlemen. The Chevrolets get 4 laps less than the Cosworths in this initial series of pit stops, so that could come into play in the late going of this race. Back to you.
So as we suggested, thanks, Jack, fuel's just a critical factor here today. They only give you so much fuel at any one course, and the fuel, of course, is alcohol, so they're very careful in calculations, but Long Beach tends to take more out of the cars.
It does, Paul, and what will happen, like a little Al's case, is they have capabilities of adjusting the fuel down, leaning it down as they go around the racetrack. So after they compute this, they'll call him on the radio, say lean it down a little bit, and then what he'll do is he'll short shift the engine. In other words, instead of shifting hypothetically at 12,000 RPM, he'll shift it at 11,000 RPM.
Well, of course, it's not just this race that is part of the tremendous weekend at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. Film stars and celebrities love the excitement of these cars and racing, so much so that each year they take to the streets in the Toyota Celebrity Race. And celebrities, like their racing heroes, are always seeking ways to get that competitive edge, even if their methods are a little unusual.
You know, it would be a shame if one of these cars screwed up.
Here, she got the spark plug wired?
Yeah, it'd be a shame if one of them wires was accidentally left off.
In addition to Jay Leno, the Undaunted group includes Cornelia Guest, Kelsey Grammer, famous for his role in Cheers, retired NFL star Walter Payton, and Ricky Schroeder, who got some last-minute advice from pro driver Dan Gurney.
A few times I didn't have my hand off.
For the celebrities, the biggest advantage of the day came with the 30-second lead they had over the pros. Heading up the field of pros was Parnelli Jones as his son, PJ Jr. Brian Wimmer from the China Beach show engaged in a battle of his own with the wall. And then there were only two, Ricky the Rookie versus Parnelli Jones. And it was Ricky Schroeder who displayed some nifty moves and crossed the finish line first, winning the Toyota Celebrity Grand Prix. And of course, an interested fan here today, there's the great Dan Gurney, Formula One champion and IndyCar champion, watching from the side of the course. And he's watching a race being dominated by Al Unser Jr. We'll be back with more after this. We're just past the halfway point at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. Al Unser Jr. is the leader. We watch the fifth place car of Emerson Fittipaldi. He's been driving alone for the past few laps, but he's been steadily moving up through the field and is trying to catch the fourth place car of Bobby Rahal. Second place is Mario Andretti. Third place is Michael. None of those cars are in contest with one another at the moment.
Now remember last week, Emo wrecked the PC-18. He's running Penske cars this year, not the Lola car, and he's running a PC-17, which was the backup car that they had, the only spare they had.
Well, the situation was just exactly that. They expected to be able to run that PC-18 at the first two races, but when he wrecked it in practice for Phoenix, they had to come to this car, which is really their learning car. Their Indianapolis 500 car has not yet arrived, or they would have been able to use that car, despite the fact it was built for a super speedway like Indianapolis.
But people have to keep in mind also that that was a very good car last year. It's the car that Danny Sullivan won the championship in, and Rick Mears won the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in, and led a lot of the races last year.
Interestingly, as we watch Bobby Rahal here, currently in fourth, and you gentlemen discussed the fuel problems that might beset the Chevrolet engines. Mr. Rahal, of course, has a Cosworth engine. He is the highest runner in this race in a non-Chevrolet engine, and he's well in contention should fuel become a big issue.
And fuel, most of the time, equates out to horsepower. If Rahal goes as much longer as we think, Sam, it would appear that the Cosworth is still not making the power that the Chevrolet is. And, of course, it looks like that, too. But Bobby's been handling it all day, and he's been fast. But if he makes better mileage, he could very well become the winner today.
We continue to watch Bobby Rahal, currently running in fourth. Bobby Cosworth hasn't been sitting still. They've made some substantial changes since the middle of last year.
They were so embarrassed last year. It's an old-time racing engine building company. They've dominated racing in many classes all over the world for many years. And when Chevrolet came in, they tried harder, they worked harder, built faster engines. They blew up for a while. Now they're staying together. They're definitely the class of the act of the class to beat. But Cosworth is working hard, and they know the fix. Just a question of is it going to work or not?
When you're talking a Cosworth engine, you're talking a racing engine that traces back almost 20, 25 years in its basic design. How often and how much can you change before you run out of things you can do?
They just sat dormant for many years and didn't build any different or new pieces. In other words, development came to a standstill, and now they're trying to develop and play catch-up and pass-up all in 1 year.
Bobby, you know, I really like your point earlier about how Bobby Rahal, who we're watching here, has something to prove. When you shift teams, especially from one very good team, and the Budweiser team certainly was a very good team, you're right, you do have a lot to prove. And right now, Rahal has got to be delighted with the way this race is going. Scott Pruitt, who took over his ride with Budweiser, of course, experienced those electrical problems early in the race, is totally out of contention. Bobby Rahal is having himself a very good day.
And this is Maury Cranes, the guy that owns that team. One of the biggest fanatics on motor racing I've ever known, Sam. He doesn't care what it takes to win. He has to win the races, and he's certainly trying when he hired Rahal.
You know, another thing that's got to make Bobby happy just at the moment is that in the first few years of this race, Rahal managed to put his car in the wall every time out. And I know, talking to him last night, he said, you know, it still lurks in the back of my mind that it can just happen to you in a split second that you're out of this race. So, you know, he's probably confident, but he's also probably being very careful.
Continuing to focus on Bobby Rahal, the fourth place car. Emerson Fittipaldi is back about 3 seconds, but on this tight course, that's back such a distance that Rahal probably isn't aware he's there, except when they come onto the Seaside Straight or onto Shoreline Drive. The leader is Al Unser Jr. Mario Andretti is still second, about 10 seconds behind Little Al. Michael Andretti is back about 10 seconds from his father, and the front of the field is running static.
Well, right now we notice that Little Al has not been gaining on Michael Andretti or Mario Andretti, and the reason why is that fuel. Jack Arut's been bringing it up. Brian Hammond has been bringing it up. We've been looking at it. It's awfully early in the race to be predicting problems, but Little Al is short shifting already, and you can see his speed drop accordingly.
This broadcast is being produced under the authority granted by CART for the private use of our audience. Any reproduction of this broadcast in any form without the express written permission of championship auto racing teams is expressly prohibited. Al Unser Jr. out in front of the field. There's Fittipaldi. He's trying to chase down Bobby Rahal, but he's got a bit of a distance to do it. Rahal, familiar car, different names this season. Still, for many of the fans, it was kind of fun watching him in the stands as they'd see this car go by and cheer for Michael Andretti. Of course, that was his car a year ago. It makes it kind of tough on everybody when they do the over-the-winter changes, but it only takes a race or so, and then everybody's dialed in.
As we see Emerson Fittipaldi, never forget, this is a man basically with two lives. He began as a Formula One racer in the early 1970s, won the World Championship twice. I mean, that's almost 20 years ago now. Retired from racing after an unsuccessful stint as a constructor. He was right out of racing. Withdrew to Brazil, tried to enjoy family life, found he couldn't do it, couldn't stay away from racing, came back into kart racing, loved it, and reasserted himself as one of the best drivers in the world. But we're seeing a man very much in an entirely second phase of his career and just loving it.
The 20 car, Emerson Fittipaldi, runs in 5th place. He came to his first IndyCar ride here at Long Beach and finished second here in 1985. Emerson Fittipaldi running in 5th. The leader is Al Unser Jr. We'll be back with more from the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. We're back. You're riding with the leader, Al Unser Jr. at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. The street is Shoreline Drive, normally for 35 miles an hour, but he's well above that now, leading this race. But his speed is certainly a question mark, because if he goes too fast, he uses fuel. And look ahead in the corner. Bobby Rahal has his problem. He actually overran the corner and is on the escape road at the end of the first turn, and they're trying to get him restarted once again. Rahal was running 4th. Doesn't look like that car is under power.
No, it certainly doesn't, Paul, and that's the bad thing. He's trying to get the guys to start him. It's one of the few places on the track where the course workers will actually get out close to the traffic and push and try to get the engine started. But we have to remember, it's really easy to vapor lock those engines when that happens. But he got it, and he's off.
And one of the corner workers apparently got a good blast of exhaust. You saw him patting the front of his legs.
They gave up on it. They gave up.
But they got it going. And I got to tell you, they have so many great corner marshals at this course. They're all volunteers. They don't make a dime. They come out there in the sun for days on days, and they're probably the greatest race fans, and this kind of event couldn't happen without them. They're a marvelous group of people.
And it can be very dangerous work without people willing to sacrifice, their time and to take those risks. This sport basically could not exist. Incidentally, Rahal is now back about where he started this race, back in 9th or 10th, and he's going to have to come back through the pack again.
All right, as we watch Bobby Rahal under power, let's re-examine this situation that created his problem. Rahal was on shoreline and running at full chat, trying to make up as much time as he could, and then his problems began.
And of course he was being shadowed by Fittipaldi and had just begun to think about Fittipaldi in his mirrors.
This is the first turn. He just went straight off the course. Is that a braking problem, or, Bobby Unser, did he miss a shift? Is it that problem of the gear change?
He just got in a little bit too deep, and if he would have turned, it would have meant that he would have slid the car sideways or just turned the front wheels, and it would have just gone straight into the wall, Paul.
All right, update the fuel situation. Here's Jack R02.
Well, actually, Paul, let's update first the Rahal situation. Have you ever driven a car and hit the brakes and they weren't there? That's exactly what happened to Bobby Rahal when he went hurtling down in that turn 1 area. Now, we'll update you on the fuel as well. Checking with all the front-running teams, first with Al Unser Jr., you heard John Anderson allude to the fact that they're going to have to back out of the boost a bit to hold on to their lead, and that accounts for the situation why the back markers, or the second, third, and fourth, are starting to close on them as we look at Raul Boisel circuiting the road course here. Now, checking with Michael and Mario Andretti, listen to this one. Mario Andretti is getting decent fuel mileage, but they say it will be marginal as far as whether he will have enough to finish the race. The man that has the best outlook right now for having enough fuel to go the distance is young Michael Andretti, who currently runs in the top 5. Back to you.
And if that happens, then I suppose there's going to be some serious conversations held in Nazareth, Pennsylvania at the family dinner table, because Mario is definitely the senior member of the team, but I think Newman Haas Racing will take a win just any way they can get it. They're not in that position right now, though. Al Unser Jr. is 5 seconds ahead of Mario Andretti. Now, this is the closest that Mario has been to Michael in the past few laps. They've been back as far as 8 or 9, and then they've just been working their way steadily forward. So, as we indicated at the start of this race, fuel definitely a consideration. There's your leader, the Valvoline car, number 2, Al Unser Jr. Back onto the long pit straight here, Shoreline Drive. Just behind him is Tom Sneva. Sneva, though, is currently running in 12th place and is 3 laps off of the leader. In other words, actually about 4 or 5 miles behind Al Unser Jr. in reality.
Look for Sneva at Indianapolis a month or so from now, though. He's going to be a contender there, at least in qualifying.
A point, and we probably ought to make it, because you'll be seeing the first day of time trials, the run for the pole here on ABC from Indianapolis, and $100,000 on the line this year for the pole qualifier. Sneva's combination, while not competitive here, the rules change slightly when they go to Indianapolis, and he is definitely a bet for the pole there. Al Unser Jr. out in front of the field. Mario Andretti is second. Michael Andretti runs third, followed by Emerson Fittipaldi, Danny Sullivan, Rick Mears, Bobby Rahal, Raul Boisel, Ari Luyendyk, and then Dominic Thompson. Or so we should see what would be in the game plan the second and final pit stop of the race. But the game plan is dependent upon the ability of these cars to economize their fuel at this incredible speed that we're seeing run. Now, they're running an average of about 85 miles an hour, but at times they're touching nearly twice that, in fact 185 on Shoreline. Bobby Rahal, you watch him, the yellow and blue car, and Rahal is back and running in 7th position right now after he ran off the end of the straight. No further indication of problems with the brakes there, but Rahal has some distance to make up. Here is the leader, Al Unser Jr. The question is, does this car, or for that matter any of the others, have sufficient fuel to make it to the end of the race and see the checkered flag? Here's Jack R02.
And Paul, the crew for the winning, or for the leading team right now, is questioning that as well. Al Unser's team huddled here much the way you would in a football game, trying to determine just how much fuel is left. Now, they've determined that they will pit for the final time on lap 75. That would leave 20 laps to go. The average so far in fuel consumption is a little bit more than a lap per gallon of fuel. Now listen to this. In this tank right here, all that remains is 17.5 gallons of fuel. By my way of arithmetic thinking, that might not be enough to go the distance if you pit on lap 75. We could have one whale of a finish here in this race.
Well, of course, that's been a factor in the past. Here is the distance first to second, and look how it's closed down. That black and white 5 car, the Haviland car of Mario Andretti, is in second, and he is closing on Little Al.
And if necessary, Rick Gallus will determine that Mario has to pass in order for Little Al to have enough fuel to get to the end. Now, another note, Paul, is a lot of racing fans ask us all the time, is why is fuel such a big factor? Why don't they give the guys another 5 gallons? What's the big deal to it? It's methanol alcohol. It isn't even gasoline, and we don't have a shortage of gasoline if it were. And the answer to that is that you have in the cart the haves and the have-nots. The haves, meaning like this team right here, the Carl Haas team, Little Al's team, Roger Penske's team, they all want more fuel. But the have-nots, the cars that don't have the big budgets, don't want them to have this extra fuel because they think that they can get them into a position like this, and the fast cars run out of fuel. The slower cars have better finishes. So that's really all the argument or all the fuel thing is about.
Well, there's one other aspect, though, too, Bobby. There is an element of altruism. I mean, the sport is trying to design parts and pieces that could someday benefit the public at large. And by trying to squeeze the most out of the fuel consumption on a race car today, someday in a fuel crunch situation on the road, we may have a car that can do another 5 or 10 miles to the gallon. I mean, the governing bodies of racing are trying to foster technical development. Agreed?
Well, they do try to do that, Sam, but I can't agree on a methanol alcohol race car is my problem.
But the principle is close enough, don't you think? He's nodding, but he's not absolutely sure. Listen, one thing, I arrived a couple of days late here because I was involved with that terrific Paris-Roubaix bicycle race. And by way of catching up, I went to the press room and got all the press releases, and these are quotes from the different drivers about how they're doing. Something struck me vis-a-vis this fuel thing, the optimism of race drivers. They're all talking about how well they hope to do, the fact that their problem would soon be overcome. And I bet you even now, worried about this fuel situation, every driver still thinks he's going to finish this race.
Well, the most optimistic man at the moment has to be Al Unser Jr., but he's certainly aware that just behind him is Mario Andretti closing for the lead. Saturday on ABC's Wide World of Sports, WBA welterweight champion Mark Freeland goes toe-to-toe with the undefeated #1 contender Rafael Pineda. He's won 19 of 20 bouts by knockout. Plus, the early Kentucky Derby favorite Easy Goer takes on his final prep race, the Wood Memorial Invitational. That's Saturday on ABC's Wide World of Sports. The black and white car belongs to Mario Andretti. He's closing down on Al Unser Jr. now, just 2 seconds back. But this could be part of the tactics of the race. Al Unser Jr. is doing something no race driver enjoys. He's running a controlled race. He's been told by his crews to slow it down. Now, if you slow it down, it's just incremental, but it's got to be terrible on the driver.
Another thing we have to watch for while this is happening is, I mentioned earlier, they can adjust their fuel, how much fuel they use. Now, if they set it too lean, it has a very good tendency to burn up the valves or burn a hole in a piston. That very well be something that we may see pretty soon. Now, Mario is closing on Little Al. Little Al is short shifting, and I'll bet he's got his fuel turned way back.
These new fuel management systems, though, don't they account for that and keep it from leaning too much?
No, they just have a limit, Paul. They can come down like, let's say, 3 steps. Now, 3 steps should make it, but it's marginal.
All right, let's go down to the pits, Jackaroo.
Paul, one man's meat is another man's poison. Now, you've heard about Al Unser Jr. and his concern about fuel. Well, all of these teams monitor their competitors' radios, and Mario and Michael Andretti's team have heard this conversation between the team and Little Al, and they're smiling just a tad about this fact, and they've let both the Andretti's know that fuel is a concern for the leader. So this could, again, come into play later in the race, that one guy can chase the leader down and really make him use some fuel up, Bobby Unser.
Very true, Jack. That's all the game planning, and it shows you that the drivers are not the only ones that are doing the game plans. The teams are more important today than they've ever been before in history.
Well, 66 laps are complete, 95 the scheduled distance, but in just a few laps, the crews will begin to take very seriously the possibility of their second stop and wondering how much fuel they will have left. We'll be back after these messages and our word from our ABC station.
This is Brian Hammonds back at Long Beach. Here is the situation in Mario Andretti's pit. There are 17 gallons of fuel remaining in his tank. He can pit no later. The farthest he can go in what he has on board is probably lap 77. It's going to be very, very close at the end of this race. When Mario comes in, he will not change tires. He'll just add all the fuel that's left in that tank. Paul?
Brian, right now we're on lap number 69. Stops due at any moment. You're on board now in that beautiful black number 7 of Ari Lyondike as he works his way around the course and looking for a good result today. He started 13th. He's now up to 9th, but Ari hasn't done very well recently, finishing or not finishing in 10 of his last 11 races. And he's really on the move here today and hopes for a good product at the end of this race.
As you watch him go through the turn, Paul, you can see he's pushing. The front end's understeering a little bit and probably having a little bit of a handling problem. Normally, that's a very good team. That's a Dick Simon team. And Dick Simon and Ari Lyondike have really clicked well together.
Let's keep an eye on his right hand when we see our onboard camera shots because he has been shifting very carefully. He told me he's been having problems. He's got the new gearbox switch for the Lolas on board, but it's not really operating the way he'd like it to. They haven't had a chance to fine-tune it. And he says from time to time when he goes into second gear, he has trouble engaging it.
And the reason for that is because between Phoenix and Long Beach is only 1 week. They haven't had time to take all the gears. They take little grinders and they grind the edges off of the shifting part, what is called the dogs of the gears, and that makes them shift easier. Well, the teams with the traveling and the preparation just haven't had time to do that, so every car here, Paul, is having that same problem.
If this will give you an idea of the sweep of technology, what Bobby just mentioned was a deep, dark secret just a couple of years ago. Nobody would ever admit to taking apart the gearbox and altering the inside. And now it's common knowledge, makes you wonder what the secrets are today.
Well, they even trade some of those gears back and forth like that now, and it's a lot of work to hand do all of them.
You got a glimpse as Al Unser Jr. came onto the straightaway of Danny Sullivan's car, and he's already headed into the pits. Let's go to Brian Hammonds.
We are in Mario Andretti's pit, still waiting.
Danny Sullivan makes a quick stop. Penske team goes to work on the car. He's in and out. Now they'll do their fuel calculations. His stop came on his lap number 70. The leader is already working lap number 71, Al Unser Jr. When will he stop? And when he stops, will he have enough fuel to make it to the finish? That's the question.
And that's going to start telling us the personality of the whole race. You see
the
Rick
other
Mears
Penske
into the
cars
pit right now. That's the other Penske car, which again, Paul, kind of tells you what their fuel personality is. Maybe they're not getting as good a fuel mileage as even little Al is right now.
Now the Penske cars stagger their stops nicely so they don't have a crowded situation in the pits, though Penske wisely chose a pit that had a space in between the two of them, even though they are adjacent.
And it's always the rule in the Penske team that the lead car comes into the pits first. The guy that's running in second place as far as the Penske team is concerned comes in next.
Al Unser Jr. out in front of the field. When will he stop? Al Unser Jr., will he have enough fuel to finish this race out in front?
It is so nerve-wracking to drive a race concerned about your fuel, particularly right now when you come up into traffic. You need to make the move and use the full power of your car to get by just for purposes of safety and keeping up the pace. But every time you take the engine right up to the red line, you know you used that little bit of extra vital fuel.
You know, Bobby, that's an interesting point. When a driver slows down, he actually becomes a little more dangerous, doesn't he?
Absolutely, Paul, and he loses his timing. When a driver is so thoroughbred and he's so high-keyed when he does a race like this that any deviation just causes him to get totally out of whack. So little Al has had to do that all day. Now, last year, he didn't do it, and he made it on fuel. But today, he slowed down.
Well, you know, it's like when you're driving your own car on the road and you see the fuel gauge running almost on empty. You know how preoccupied with everything you become.
All right, let's go to the pits. Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, you know, one of the things that what a difference a year makes with these new LCD displays and the onboard computer systems, drivers like Al Unser Jr., while concerned about fuel, can run the string out a little further than they normally would because the computer will calculate just how much is left. We discussed the situation with little Al's dad, Al Sr., and he said that's one of the reasons why this team will try and push their final stop as far beyond 75 as possible. And he'll be able to read it right there on that little TV screen that sits in front of him beneath the steering wheel. Back to you.
All right. Al Unser Jr. anticipating a stop at any moment. Al Unser Jr. leads it. The 27 car slowing down on the main stretch. Bellavio, who could be a problem for some cars coming on, but the leaders are over on the backside. There is Al Unser Jr. on Seaside Straight as he comes around Derek Daly and makes that right-hand turn in. One of the prettiest shots in motor racing as Al Unser Jr. is out in front of this field and running a good race.
And on his signboard, when he comes around this time, Paul, it will say in, meaning pit right the next lap around.
So we anticipate a stop by Al Unser Jr. Second is Mario Andretti, followed by Michael. Emerson Fittipaldi is fourth, and Danny Sullivan is fifth. We'll be back with the leader, Al Unser Jr., as he comes in for a stop. Let's go down to the pits.
And Al Unser Jr.'s crew goes to work. They're going to change tires and take on fuel, precious fuel, draining the hoses out with everything they have. There will be no fuel left in the tank. The leader is off and away. He engages the gearbox, and he is back out on the racetrack. But a very, very tense couple of moments here. John Anderson, who is the team manager, doing his calculations, and it was a little bit earlier than they had hoped to bring the car in. Now the question is, will they have enough to go the distance? Back to you.
A blazing stop. Part of the contribution of that is there wasn't that much fuel that had to go into the car.
No, it doesn't take very long to make a pit stop like that, Paul. My calculations, for example, show, I know that little Al normally gets 1.7 miles per gallon. My calculations show he must get 1.9 to get to the finish line. And if that's true, he may not even make it past the first turn. That'd be coasting.
Of course, Jack Arute and Brian Hammonds are both going to stay on top of that story. Little Al, Sam Posey, knows that stop. He's got all kinds of new data coming up on the screen in front of him with that new computer system. I wonder what's going through his mind now as we watch the man that assumed the lead. We'll come back to that. This is Mario Andretti, the current leader. Let's go to Brian.
Mario's in. He's going to get all 17 gallons. It's aboard that fuel tank, and that is all that's left. They're not going to change tires. All that will do will take valuable time. And there goes Mario Andretti with a very quick stop, and every ounce of fuel is out of that tank.
Paul Newman times it when he looks down. He knows it was a 9-second stop for Mario Andretti. Michael Andretti picked up the lead as Mario roared out of the pits. So the order at the moment, with Mario Andretti and Al Unser Jr. having made the stop, is Michael, followed by Mario, followed by Al Unser Jr. Emerson Fittipaldi is in fourth. Let's go to the pits and Jack.
The intensity down here in the leader's pit is just incredible. When they made that pit stop, and as you know, sometimes you can get as much as maybe a quarter of a gallon of fuel stuck in this inlet and not getting into the car. When they were done with their stop, they opened it up, went to see if any spilled out. When it didn't, they all let out a cheer and a thumbs up sign. They've got all the fuel they've got on board with little Al right now. Back to you.
So the leaders have stopped. Al Unser Jr., Mario Andretti. Michael will stop shortly. That's not anticipated to be anything other than a quick splash, get in all that fuel, and then get back into the action. But the lead will most likely go back to Al Unser Jr., and then fuel will help determine who will win the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. We'll be back. At the front of the field, Mario Andretti with a quick stop picked up the lead, but Al Unser Jr. pulled up right behind, and now they are fighting at the front. Tom Sneva wisely gives them plenty of space. Little Al pulls up behind Mario Andretti. Now he's right at the back door and trying to get past Mario. As Mario loses it, Mario kisses the wall, and Little Al keeps it going and goes on through.
The parts even hit his car, came right over the top, Paul. That was really... Now, this should help Little Al. I hate to say it in the fuel deal. I don't hate to say it.
But Little Al's missing a wing. Now that is gone. That hasn't been a factor here. Other people have had that happen and done very well.
It probably is going to hurt him that bad because we must remember all day it's been fuel that's limited his speed, not a wing on the left front. He's still got the right front wing, though.
So Little Al's nemesis, Mario Andretti, is out of the way. But still, the question is fuel. This is what happened. Again, from the onboard, Mario moved way over to the inside, and it looks like he just caught an edge of the wall from the inboard.
Paul, it doesn't even look like that happened, to be honest with you. It looks like maybe a tire or something broke on the car because he was going straight when that happened. Really, there was no reason for him to hit that wall.
It is not logical from that point of view. Mario is not a man who makes mistakes. Al Unser Jr. is now the leader. Mario Andretti with his problems, and Michael Andretti may have to pick up the challenge on behalf of the family.
Michael is 20 seconds back, which puts Little Al in a terrific position to conserve the fuel.
And Mario is still sitting by the side of the course.
He'll just short shifting a whole bunch right now, and his whole race now, or the rest of his race, will be predicated on how fast that Michael is able to pull up on him.
Here's another view of this same situation, Bobby. Both cars heading for the corner. Little Al comes to the inside, and the problem was Al's.
Little Al ran right into the back of him. That's where his wing went, and some of those parts we saw flying around was Little Al's front wing. He absolutely booted Mario.
What was Little Al trying to do? Here in the pits, they're getting ready with another nose wing for Little Al's car, should they need it. But again, experience here has demonstrated the nose wing isn't that critical, except if Al's seeing it, then he's going to be on the radio and saying, I have to have it, but he doesn't have that kind of lead to make that kind of change.
No, I doubt that they'll be coming in. Little Al right now sitting there wondering how in the world he got to Mario that easy and that quick. It's just not like something like that to happen.
I think it's very tough for a driver to shake off a mistake as big as the one that Little Al just made. I mean, it's an awkward situation. He knows he put another driver, a major contender, Mario Andretti himself, out of the race due to a quick slip by himself. Now he's got to gather his composure. He was lucky. It was a racing accident. It doesn't reflect well on Little Al, but it was a racing accident. The race is now his to win. He's got to gather his emotions together and not make any mistakes. He's still got a fuel problem.
You know, I wonder, we term it generically as a mistake. But is it also possible, because brakes fade, that Little Al depended on more braking power than the car had to offer at that moment?
That's quite possible, Paul. Plus, it's a favorite place that Little Al has of passing. If we'll remember, last year, he passed Danny Sullivan, taking the lead in that very same corner.
Let's go down to the pits. Jack Arute.
Paul, all this work behind me with these wings is just a backup in case Little Al has a problem and says he has to come in. They have no intentions of bringing him in right now, and they are indeed still concerned about the fuel. Back to you.
Well, if fuel is a concern, then Little Al got some breathing room. He was locked in a pitch battle for the lead, but now he has a 16-second lead over Michael Andretti. That should enable him to slow down just a bit and conserve on the fuel. But will he be able to conserve enough? We'll find out. Junior, 11 seconds behind the leader. Michael can run flat out. His crew has reported they still have some fuel back in their pit. He's got to feel good.
And also there's the sense, because of the good radio contact of Michael, trying to avenge really what happened to his father at the hands of Al Unser Jr. So Michael carries forward with him now the energy of having more fuel in his tank, the energy of being the pursuer of a car that is both crippled physically and being driven by a guy that knows he made a mistake.
And Michael, in all probability, would know what happened to Dad by now.
Because
maybe
of the
not the specifics, but they certainly would have radioed that Mario and Little Al had contact and Mario is out.
Well, I still think Michael is low on fuel also. I think he pretty much has the same problem, because as I listen to him shift down the front straightaway, I know that Little Al is short shifting and Michael's shifting in the same places. So I think they're just both having the same problem, just lack of fuel.
Second place car, Michael Andretti, works his way back onto Shoreline, completing lap number 91. Michael Andretti, 4 laps to go now, 95 laps the scheduled distance. He chases Al Unser Jr. Al running with a lame car, one wing missing on the left front. Not a critical factor, but one that could certainly influence the finish. Though Little Al seems to have stabilized about 10 seconds ahead of the leader of this race.
We talked about how quickly the chemistry of things can change. At the outset, I said that between the two Andrettis, of course, there was going to be a season-long rivalry. Now, look at what's happened here. Mario was basically leading this team until he was put out by Little Al. And now, suddenly, we have Michael Andretti scoring, if the race is to finish the way it is now, points for second here, points for 4th place at Phoenix last week compared to Mario's 8th place. And suddenly, the whole flow of the season is starting to belong to Michael, and Mario is in the catch-up position. So things happen very, very quickly in racing.
Sam, as we watch Michael Andretti going around the racetrack, just watch how smooth the car is sitting on the racetrack now. That's an indication that he's slowing down. Slowing down doesn't mean slowing way down, but just ease off his pace, and he just means he's slowing down to save fuel.
Well, Michael Andretti certainly knows this track. He won his first IndyCar race here at Long Beach. Back to the leader, Al Unser Jr. Little Al works works his way up now behind the gold and black number 7 car of Ari Lyondike. And Little Al, when he comes upon traffic now, has to be incredibly careful. This is where the wing might be a factor because the car is slightly unstable when he comes in and tries to maneuver to pass someone.
Especially on a road circuit. If this was at Indianapolis, Paul, he'd have a trouble or have a problem all the time. But here on the road circuit, it isn't quite as bad, but it is when he gets behind the traffic. Now here's what just happened. Here's the big story right there. You saw Mario getting ready to turn into the turn. Little Al was in a little too deep. Either that or he ran out of brakes. And he just walked Mario right in the back end and spun him out.
Mario Andretti, the number 5 car, was the leader of the race. Little Al was chasing him. And then Little Al tagged the back end of Mario, putting Mario out. Danny Sullivan slowing down, but because of a left rear tire that's gone, he's running literally on the wheel.
Now, he's also wearing out the bottom of the race car. It isn't helping that race car along too good right there because these cars only have a couple of inches clearance, Paul.
And Danny Sullivan was the 4th place car at the time of that situation developing, so he is going to be passed, and the man that's going to pass him is going to be Bobby Rahal. Here's the order. The top 5: Al Unser Jr., Michael Andretti, Emerson Fittipaldi, Bobby Rahal, Danny Sullivan, and Danny Sullivan already having been passed by his teammate Rick Mears. Then Ari Lyondike, Raul Boesel, Derek Daly is in 9th, and Tom Sneva runs in 10th.
You know, thinking again about the situation between Little Al here we see and Mario Andretti, who of course is out of the race. When 2 cars are running as close as they were at the moment that they came together, there's a collective consciousness really between the 2 drivers about who's going to do what. It's almost like a dance, 2 people dancing, and really they just got out of step in a sense, and Little Al's step on Mario. I mean, that's really about what happened. Now, of course, Little Al has the race all his own way because with this lead, and he's got over 11 seconds with the time remaining, unless he runs out of fuel, this is going to be his day, albeit a clouded one.
Al Unser Jr. watches his mirrors so very carefully. He is looking for back-to-back wins at Long Beach in his final couple of miles right now. Behind him, trying to catch him, is Michael Andretti.
Yes, and remember, every time Little Al comes by the pits, the radio reception is very good, and Rick Gallis will be telling him exactly what the space is between he and Michael, so Little Al's driving only as hard as he has to.
The next time that he goes by the pits will be for the checkered flag. He won't have to say a thing except congratulations, you've done it. That is, if there is enough fuel on board. The final short straightaway.
In the wake of all that's happened late in this race, let's not miss the significance of what's happened today in a larger sense, and that is to say that the Penske team, which a week ago we thought would be invincible this season, could not only be beaten, they can be humiliated.
Al Unser Jr. makes the turn off of the hairpin. The crowd begins to roar, as does Little Al's engine. The fuel was indeed there. The checkered flags, and Little Al has scored back-to-back wins at Long Beach. Al Unser Jr. in the Valvoline car wins the run through the streets. He begins to wave now to the crowd on the victory lap. Michael Andretti comes by 12 seconds back in second, followed by Emerson Fittipaldi, Bobby Rahal, and Rick Mears. But the winner of the day, as you're on board with Michael Andretti, the winner, of course, is Al Unser Jr. Not only a good drive, for the most part, perhaps a single exception, a skillful drive, but one in which the crew definitely figured. They calculated, they were careful, they radioed. Shelley Unser gives a hug to Rick Gallis, the team owner, and the team begins to congratulate one another. They have won.
But this is not the wild euphoria that we saw here last year when Little Al won. It is definite. No, I think it's tempered by what they know happened between Little Al and Mario.
Well, he had his first pole position for this race too, Sam. Yeah, last year was a very exciting race for him. This year is going to end up being a real exciting race.
Look at this. Mario Andretti gets a ride from his son, Michael. He's looking down there saying, not so fast, Michael. Take it easy, pal.
It's a pretty unique deal, isn't it?
Well, we saw it at Indianapolis when Tim Richmond came almost into victory lane on the side pod of Johnny Rutherford's car. Now Michael gives his dad a lift. A hitchhiker comes in at the end of the race.
And the question is it an angry Mario Andretti or a philosophical one? We'll find out soon.
So Al Unser Jr. now coming through turn number 10. The hairpin is just ahead, and Al Unser Jr. has won the race here, and the crowd loved every minute of it. In fact, at the second pit stop, the crowd came to its feet and did not sit down after that. So Al Unser Jr. switches the engine off and rolls to a stop. Let's go down now. Jack R02 is waiting for the arrival of Al Unser Jr.
And Al Unser Jr. has come to a rest here in Victory Lane, getting the congratulations of his team and the kart people. And let's see if we can get a word with Al. I hope you get your helmet off here, and we'll be able to talk to him. And Sam Posey and Paul Page, you talked about the fact that there was a quiet resolution here. Well, it's the same way that he came into the pits here, as we're taking the tubes off, part of the problem, and he's going to get out of the car here, and we'll get a chance to get a word with him, because it's somewhat mixed emotions. But he won his first pole position here after a brilliant career. And listen to the crowd. They are certainly congratulating this young man. And Al, congratulations. Just an incredible run. It was close several times. Fuel and then the altercation there with the Andretti's. How do you feel about this one?
Well, I got mixed emotions about it. You know, I feel good about it, but Mario did, you know.
We had a problem here, and what happened?
I just want to say that you know, we came up on Sneva, and Sneva stopped, and it was like a traffic jam, and I had momentum going. I ain't putting the blame on anybody. It's my fault because I did the hitting, but God dang it, you know, they all stopped in front of me, and couldn't help it, you know.
Now, it was tight quarters here. Why we turned around was Mario Andretti came here to Victory Lane and had a couple of words, and it's tough when you have mixed emotions like Al Unser Jr. does, but we're going to have to take a look at it here as he gets the congratulations of Shelley Unser. Back up to you, gentlemen.
A disappointed Mario Andretti just a few feet away, but Al Unser Jr. demonstrated that he's a class act. Let's go to Brian Hammonds.
Mario Andretti's with us. Mario, you went up to Al Unser and Al Jr. in the Victory Lane. What'd you say to him?
Well, I find it very difficult to congratulate him, of course.
What happened out there?
Well, he just blatantly just punted me right out of the way, and here we're going for the lead. This is the second time in a few months. In the last race in Miami, the same way. Now, if that's the way that he wants to play, I think it's pretty sorry way to drive, really.
Mario Andretti obviously very disappointed here at Long Beach. Paul?
Definite anger there. A racing situation. Al Unser Jr. has apologized, but Mario Andretti still is a bit angry. Al Unser Jr. wins it unofficially, followed by Michael Andretti, Emerson Fittipaldi, Bobby Ray Hall, Rick Mears, then Raul Boisel, Harry Lyondike, Danny Sullivan, and Derek Daly. Unofficial results. The race has been run through the streets, and for the second year in a row, Al Unser Jr. has come home the winner.